Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode of Help and Trade podcast, where we give space to entrepreneurs and their startups. My today's guest is Jesse Szepieniec, who already was on our podcast as a guest, presenting his own venture called Pocket Revolutions, and is here today again because we decided to do a workshop. Currently, everything is on lockdown, therefore making a podcast is really difficult, and doing a podcast on remote proves to be rather difficult. So we decided to make a workshop, invite our guests in our usual meetups, and the topic we present is called Wardley Mapping, which is a methodology which will help you make better decision making in your businesses, in your ventures, but also in your private endeavors. And Jesse is so kind to present the topic. Therefore, dear listener, if you would like to see the video recording of it, would you like to have some tangible materials, please go for our YouTube link where we display the materials that Jesse actually presented in our workshop. And if you just want to continue listening, please be aware that there is also a hands-on practical part in our recording where Jesse went through the business case of Help and Trade Meetup, where we displayed how Wardley Mapping can really work. So better not to miss the chance to see how it really works hands-on. Please switch to YouTube. That's probably going to be a better experience for you overall. Anyway, thank you very much for coming over today. Really appreciate it. And before we go on with the workshop, please connect with us on our social media, whether it is Facebook or Instagram under the Help and Trade 1 brand name, or you can also connect with us via Instagram, just as well as you can drop us an email on contact@helpandtrade.com. Jesse as well presents his contact details where you can connect with him. So don't forget to go for jesse@pocketrevolutions.com. And with that, thank you very much. And I'm giving the word to Jesse, who will right away jump into presenting what is Wardley Mapping all about. Thank you for listening and stay tuned.
I'll try to give you guys a brief overview of Wardley Mapping, what it is, what you can use for. And then I'm going to use Stefan as a guinea pig in the following 20 minutes. And we're going to try to construct one live with some feedback from you guys. So that's the plan. So why are we here? As Stefan said, this meetup has a certain purpose and it's geared towards entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs have businesses and they want their businesses to, at the very least, survive and at the very most, to thrive. And so how do you do that? If you go back to the fundamental concepts of what a business is, you can see it as an entity in an environment. And this entity can take certain actions and it can shape its environment, but it can also adapt to its environment. This is very fundamental. The challenge becomes when we start thinking about what is our environment and what steps can we take? How can we shape our environment and how can we adapt to it? So at this point, it gets a bit more complicated. So I see it as 4 main challenges. I'll go into these in a bit more depth after this, but the main challenges as I see it are something I call the high dimensionality problem. This means that there's so many things to take into account. There's a lot of dimensions or a lot of domains that it just becomes too complex to analyze. Then there's the problem that you have all these dimensions and they're also changing. So, what your customers want today might be different tomorrow. And then there's the ambiguity problem that you might be able to measure certain things, like how many customers you have, but what do they really want? This is something that could be interpreted differently depending who you ask. And then in this world with these 3 challenges, then the only way to really learn is to act and then to observe the response of your actions. Are they providing the results that you want? But then the problem is that we don't really know the beginning state before we acted. So when we take that action and the result is, say, positive, but we didn't know the beginning state, that we don't know what we did was right for the right reasons. So it's these challenges that Wardley Mapping tries to address. So I'll go into them a bit deeper, except for the ambiguity problem. I won't be covering that in this presentation. So Wardley tackles these by drawing from different bodies of knowledge. The high dimensionality problem he tackles by using an old book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu has something called the 5 factors. I'll go over that in the next slides. The everything is constantly changing problem, Wardley tackles with Boyd's ODA loop. And the lack of context problem, this is where the Wardley mapping comes in. So I'll cover that now. So the high dimensionality problem. So the problem is, as a business that wants to survive and thrive, you need to take into account, why are you in business? What service or product are you offering? Who are your competitors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a list, but the questions go on. You can see these as different dimensions, different domains, just a lot to consider. So Wardley's approach is, okay, let's group these together. He says, let's look at this ancient book, comes from China, on how to wage war properly. And the author, Sun Tzu, identifies 5 factors. And the 5 factors are purpose, landscape, climate, doctrine, and leadership. Purpose is, why are you playing this game? Why are you waging war? Why are you here? The landscape is a description of the environment as it is right now. So in the context of war, this might be the mountains and the rivers and the trees, etc. In the context of business, this might be what resources have you, who are your competitors, a snapshot of the current state of things. The climate is less clear. These are the forces that act on the landscape. They can change the landscape, but they're constantly changing. And we don't have control over the climate, but we can, by observing the landscape, we can observe what the patterns are. Then there's doctrine. So doctrine classically in Sun Tzu's Art of War is about, what do you tell your troops? What are the operational principles? What is the training that you give them? And then finally, when you integrate all these and you make decisions, this is the domain of leadership. So again, what Wardley is doing here is he's saying that to survive and thrive as a business is such a complicated problem. Let's group it into these 5 different domains, and this should make it easier. But there's one problem. But before we get there, let me show you how this works in a different domain. So for those of you familiar with poker, this will be easier. I'm quite familiar with the scene, so for me, this is an example that's easy to talk about. So in poker, we can also construct a lot of these questions, a lot of these different dimensions. So why are you at the table? Because you want to make money. This becomes your purpose. Then the amount of chips you have, the amount of chips your opponents has, the position of my opponents, this becomes the landscape. Then how the game works. If your opponent is maybe getting angry and starts to play differently. If your opponent hasn't played a hand in a very long time because he's waiting for 2 aces, for instance, these are things that are changing. So this becomes the climate. And then you might have a doctrine as a poker player yourself. So if you feel emotional, you're not going to play a hand. Or in general, you choose that you're going to be very conservative. This is your principle. So this is your doctrine. And then ultimately, again, integrating all these, this becomes the domain of leadership. So again, we're taking this domain with a lot of different questions, a lot of different dimensions, and we're saying, let's group it into these 5 different domains: purpose, landscape, climate, doctrine, and leadership. The problem is that all these dimensions, they're changing and they influence each other. So the climate influences the landscape, and what your customers want might be different today than it is tomorrow, than it was yesterday. So how do you deal with this constant change? So to tackle this challenge, Wardley goes to another body of knowledge by John Boyd, who was a military strategist for the US Navy. And he came up with something called Boyd's Observe, Orient, Decide, Act loop. So basically he says what you need to do in any game, in any combat, is observe, use that observation to orient yourself, decide on a play, so decide on what to do, act, and then again observe. So basically iterate on what you're doing. And the quicker you iterate, the better you can outsmart your opponent. So what Wardley does is he has these 5 domains from Sun Tzu, and he says, okay, let's use that, but let's also iterate quickly. So he combines these two models. And this is what becomes sort of Wardley's body of knowledge, which is a lot to grasp. So that's why this slide, there's a lot of information here, but basically see it as the combination of these two models. And I've drawn a little map here under landscape, because this is the part where Wardley mapping, the mapping part, where that comes in. So it's only when we're talking about the landscape that we start mapping, but all these other domains, they sort of have a relationship with the map. So once you draw the map, you're able to talk about the other domains. So then, if you remember at the beginning, there was a fourth problem, and this was the lack of context. So once we make a decision, we don't know if it was the right one or not. So for instance, if you go to business books on strategy, they'll say you need to have focus. But focus could, someone that drives a project into the ground because he isn't open to any other feedback, this person's very focused. But the project or the business has been driven into the ground. So the question is, what is the context in which this advice works? And this is something that Wardley's body of knowledge tries to address with a map. So the map is really a solution to this problem that there's a lack of context. In addition, a map is also a tool to help you think. So once you visualize things, then you're able to more easily compare the relationship between different things and compare what happens when you move them and how they relate to other things. Once you've done that, you're also able to communicate your ideas, because you've taken something that's in your mind that might have been implicit. You might not know exactly what the relationship was or how to draw it. And once you put it on the map, it becomes explicit, and then you can communicate and talk about it. And often this creates conflict, because you might not agree with someone else in your team or in your business about it. But this is good. This is part of the purpose of mapping, is to take things that are implicit in your mind and make them explicit in a map so that you can discuss them. This helps you learn about things. It helps you learn about what are sort of the mental models that other people have about your business. It helps you learn because you're putting a lot of things into context and you're starting to see the larger picture. So these are some quotes from Wardley's book. He says, "But if I cannot see the landscape, then how do I know whether an approach is universal or context specific?" So this is his gripe with business books, business strategy books, is that you get this advice, but it's not clear if it's universal. So universal would be something that falls under doctrine, something that you tell your troops to apply to whatever the situation. But something context specific is something that you only apply in very specific situations. And so you need the context, you need the map to be able to determine if a piece of advice is going to work for you or not. So what are the requirements for a map? So Wardley is very particular about this. He says, a map is only a map if it is visual. A map is only a map if there are components that you can put on the map that represent something. A map is only a map if the distances mean something. So this is where it gets interesting, because there are many techniques that are called maps. You've got impact mapping and story mapping. But the issue with these maps is that a distance in these maps does not mean anything. If you increase the distance between two components, the map is still the same, nothing changes. Whereas what Wardley is saying here is that if you want a map to contain or to be as useful as possible, you need to make the distances between components, it needs to have a meaning. So in both directions, in the x-axis and the y-axis. And so then he also says the orientation also needs to mean something. So if you just have the distances between points meaning something, so let's say 2 points are separated on this screen, and then we say, okay, this is 10 meters. That's fine, but is it 10 meters towards north or towards west? So this is where orientation gives you sort of an extra level of information. in the map. And then lastly, the map needs to be context specific. That means that these components need to pertain to my specific situation. They need to represent components that are relevant to me and relevant to my business, and not relevant to someone else's business, or not components that belong to someone else. So these are the requirements for a map. And so the structure that Wardley came up with, again, to create context, to be able to understand how to make these decisions, he said, okay, let's try and capture this high dimensional problem of trying to navigate your business in 2 dimensions. And I've purposely blacked out the content of this graph. I only want you to see the dimensions. So these are the axes. So we've got the evolution axis on the x-axis, we've got the value chain axis on the y-axis. So these are the dimensions that Wardley chose to best capture the landscape of a business. And to understand Wardley mapping, you need to understand these dimensions. So I want you to get a feeling for what they mean. So in the next slide, I want you to get a feeling for what evolution means. So this is the x-axis in the Wardley map. So Wardley says that every component in a capitalistic system under influence of competition will evolve. So this is an example of the mobile phone. We see that the mobile phone started off as some very prototypey, heavy, inefficient, unreliable, big thing here in the left. But it worked. But that's the only thing that it got right. It just worked. It was sort of a proof of concept. And that's where inventions start. And then slowly it becomes sort of more custom. They work out some of the flaws, and it basically gets better and better until it becomes something like that we would call custom built. And once it's custom built, it's not quite yet a product. It's not something you would buy on the shelf. There's still some problems with it. But then again, under the same influences of a capitalistic system, it becomes better until you do find it on the shelf and it does get marketed. And then this is where it's most lucrative for businesses to sell this product. And then because it's lucrative, more businesses will enter the scene and more will sell the similar products. And what's going to happen is that the prices will go down, and eventually also that the mobile phones will become less differentiated. So what you see here, I've added some of the phones for the top selling phones of 2019. And what you see, if you look at all the phones throughout their evolution, is that you see in the beginning, and this is a characteristic of the evolution of any component. In the beginning, there's just one, which is clunky and unreliable. But then there's many different ones as they're trying to search for like what's the most efficient, what's the best way to build this thing. And there's a lot of variety. But then the product slowly becomes undifferentiated, and we call it a commodity. So nowadays, phones look almost the same. Performance is almost the same. Everything's almost the same. And this is the fate of any component in a capitalistic society, but not just physical, tangible products. This also applies to, for instance, processes or data. Data becomes more structured over time. So this is a way of looking, and I purposefully say components because it not just applies to products. It also applies to other categories of things, which makes the Wardley map a bit more confusing, a bit more ambiguous, because you can map the evolution of a phone on the same map as you map the evolution of a process. But if you just accept this level of ambiguity, it becomes a very powerful tool. So again, this is the x-axis, evolution. Then we have the y-axis. The y-axis is what Wardley calls the value chain. So basically what he does is he starts at the top and he says, let's start with the user. And then what does the user need? So what are the needs of the user? So in this case, he used to work for a company that offered photo print services, and that also moved into offering online photo storage. So here we've got the customer, and then we draw the needs, online image manipulation, because they want to edit their images online, and they want to store their photos online, and they want to print them. To accomplish these things, to print them, this needs to happen through a website. So we just follow this chain of needs. So print needs a website. Online photo storage also needs to happen through the website. And so by asking ourselves for each component, what does it need to exist to be able to offer this, we can create this chain. And this is what Wardley calls the value chain. And again, we start with the user. We ask ourselves, what are their needs? And then we go down and say, okay, what do we need to offer a website? Well, we need a CRM. What else do we need for a website? We need a platform. And these terms, again, are generic. And how you split them is sort of up to you, and is also the art of mapping. Because you can say platform, but you could also break that down into smaller things, but then the map becomes more confusing, more conflated. So you need to strike the right balance between clarity and precision. And so this is the balance that he came up with. So you've got here this value chain, and he ended with power and data center at the bottom. Another aspect of this dimension is that the top tends to be closer to the customer, tends to be more visible. So the customer will know about the website, they will know about the print option, they will know about the feature called online photo storage. They won't necessarily know about the data center or about the power or about compute. So these things are a bit more behind the scenes. But again, this is a bit of an ambiguous category. And it's, again, this trade-off between precision and usefulness, really. So now we've covered the two dimensions. So what does that look like in a map? So what happens is that you draw the value chain as before. So I'll go back one slide real quick. But now you give every component in this map, you give it a place on the evolution axis. So in a way, you decide for every component, where is this in its evolutionary life cycle? And for data center, for instance, this was seen as a product. Power was seen as a commodity, because this is completely undifferentiated. Doesn't matter who you get your power from. It's cheap. It's a utility. But online image manipulation was still very much in the custom build phase. So this is a Wardley map, and this gives you an overview of the components of your business, where they are in their evolution, knowing that all components are going to be moving further down the evolutionary scale at their own pace, but you know that they're all moving. And this starts to give you some insight into, okay, I know that these are going to move. I know my competition probably has similar components. This is something you can map separately. You could start thinking about, maybe here's a component which seems to be connected to a lot of other components, but it's not very evolved. Maybe we should focus our business efforts on evolving this component, making it more of a product, trying to reduce the defects, reduce the uncertainty there, make it more of a commodity. Because as things become a commodity, they become more stable, they become cheaper. So this is an instance of where a Wardley map can give you some insight on where to focus your efforts. So Wardley calls for instance, the fact that every component, or the tendency, I should say, of every component to evolve, to move along the x-axis, he calls this a climatic pattern. And he has a bunch of climatic patterns which you can look up on his website, which I'll share. And yes, I guess that's all I want to say on this slide. So there's these climatic patterns. Here's another way a Wardley map can be useful. So because you have custom built sort of the unstable versions on the left hand side, you've got the stable mass-produced versions on the right-hand side, you can also think about using different development philosophies to build software in those areas. So when you don't know what problem you're solving and you don't know what solution you're building, then Agile is probably the best solution for you, because Agile optimizes for minimizing the cost of change. But if you are in the middle and you know which problem you're solving, you're just looking for a solution, you're looking for minimum viable product, then maybe lean methodologies are best for you. And if you know what the problem is and you know what the solution is, and you only care about reducing defects, so this is the business of car manufacturers, for instance, then Six Sigma is all about reducing the amount of defects. So this will be the best approach to go. So in this way, understanding where the components of your business are, it can inform the decision on what type of philosophy to use to build software or to tackle that problem. Another way Wardley Maps can give insight. So if you say you have components that are in the genesis or in the custom build stage, this requires a special type of person to be active in this stage, because they're on the frontier of what is known. So they need to be comfortable with failing. They need to be comfortable with not having clear instructions what to do. So Wardley calls these pioneers. They're the innovators. And as soon as they've found something that might be of value, they've built a prototype, but it's not stable, but the concept is there, they pass it on to the settlers, and the settlers are able to take it through the next stage. So these are people that maybe have a slightly less appetite for uncertainty, but they can turn this into something a bit more stable, and they can then pass it on to town planners. And these are maybe developers or people that really value stability and really are able to focus. Their strength is really scaling things up, not so much finding new things. So if you view these evolutionary areas as having different levels of uncertainty, you can use that to pair it with people that are also comfortable with those different levels of uncertainty. So that's a quick overview of Wardley mapping. I've tried to sort of parse it with my own words, because I think that's the most valuable contribution I can give on this topic. I've been starting doing this with businesses, and I've noticed that especially getting in terms of making decisions, understanding how to make decisions, this can be a very valuable tool. So if you're interested in your startup or your whatever type of business you have, you're interested in strategic decision making, drop me a line. I'm happy to discuss Wardley mapping or anything else you want to discuss. My email is jesse@pocketrevolutions.com. Pocket Revolution is my agency. And with that, I think we can jump into the live demo. Right, Stefan?
Sure, of course. Question on you, Jesse. Do you want to have questions now by the audience, or do you want to have questions later?
Yeah, you know what? Now seems like a good time. I was planning to do it at the end, but now seems like a good time.
Sure. Anyone who is joining, who is in our meetup, you are free to question anything you want, Jesse. Just be aware that we are recording this session, therefore, yeah. Also you are going to be recorded.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
What would be the definition of meaning climatic pattern?
So let me go back to. It's a good question. So Wardley uses Sun Tzu's 5 factors, and one of the factors is climate. And the way Sun Tzu defines climate is these are patterns that you can observe and you can learn, and they occur in the environment and they affect the landscape, but you cannot influence them yourself. So in the context of war, this might be, the seasons coming in, or this might be the rain, or this might be a cold wind from the north, or something like that. These are climatic patterns in the context of war. In the context of business, these are things like everything evolves. Like I said, that's a climatic pattern. Or another climatic pattern is that things tend to take electricity, for instance. As electricity has evolved to become a utility, we don't even think about using it. Others have been able to build on top of that using electricity. Right now, we're using a web conferencing software which leverages things like the webcam in our laptops, the laptop itself, internet, electricity. All these things have become utilities, and that's also a climatic pattern, that this sort of higher order of complexity can be built using components that have already become utilities. So all these sort of characteristics of how the environment behaves, these are all climatic patterns.
Are there any restrictions, dependencies outside of science?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Abhishek, can you elaborate?
Yes, I just wanted to know in which area you can use it. Is it only for science or scientific, like business, scientific business, or any business? What is your scope?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have yet to see an area where it cannot be applied, because I've done a Wardley map on myself,
okay,
which has nothing to do, or very little to do, with capitalistic systems. Because you see evolution also in biological systems. I mean, that's where we get the word from. So it's, I'm sure there's a limit somewhere, but I haven't found it yet.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay, shall we jump in, Stefan?
I am open to do so. Is anyone else in the meetup? Do you have any questions you'd like to fire on Jesse? Make him sweat a bit? If no, then we can proceed with the hands-on.
Okay. So I will be needing the audience for this, though. For the people here, as I said, a Wardley map starts with the user's needs. And it's important to realize that the user's needs, you need to identify those from conversations with users. So now that I'm doing a map for Stefan, presumably on his business, and seeing as this meetup is an extension of his business, and you are users of this meetup, I want to ask everybody in this meetup right now, what do you hope to accomplish by visiting this meetup or these meetups, if you visit some in the past? What are you trying to get out of this?
Luis here. So I would say clarity and understanding of the landscape in the case of business startups in Zurich.
Okay. Clarity of the landscape, is that what you said?
Yes.
Of the startup landscape.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that Rahel said new knowledge. Vicky says new connections. Okay, network of like-minded people who can help each other facing similar problems. Okay, how do we capture that? That's like, I'm just gonna quote that literally, network of like-minded people. Okay, feel less alone. Okay, I'm gonna turn this into support from like-minded people. I think that captures both points, less alone as well as network. Okay. I think I've got these four. Clarities of the startup landscape, new knowledge, new connections, support from like-minded people. Okay, I'm gonna... Okay, so then the question is for Stefan, what capabilities does Help and Trade currently have that addresses these needs?
Yes. Well, we have our meetup, which everybody is now part of right now.
Yes. Let me put the meetup here. Okay. What else?
We have our application, which is in development.
Sorry, the meetup supports which one? Supports all of these?
Definitely, yes, all four.
Okay. So what other capabilities do you have that address these?
We're also creating the application itself.
Okay, so you call this what, the application?
You can just call it the app, yeah.
Okay.
And that definitely gives you the idea about, like, definitely gives you new connections, support from like-minded people.
Okay.
And I wouldn't necessarily go into the clarity of startup landscape, but it certainly can give you the opportunity to explore the market around you. But that's not really clarity in the startup landscape. So I would probably keep it as it is right now.
Okay. So then the meetup, what does the meetup need to exist?
Sure. We need certain structure that we implemented, which is the workshops and the hot seats. Those are the structural parts of the meetup, which are important. Networking afterwards. Those are the three essential parts of the meetup.
Okay, let's capture those as separate things.
Sure.
Hot seat. Sleep. Okay. Hot seat, got the workshop, and the networking afterwards.
Exactly, that will be the third point.
I'm not paying attention to the x-axis right now. I'm just focusing on getting the chain of value.
We need location. We need the time when it happens.
Hang on. So now you're talking about all three. They all need location.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Need the time that they happen. And see, already we're mixing up different types of entities. So people that are used to diagramming, they can get a bit annoyed by this, as have I, because, you know, a meetup and a location are very different things. But this is part of Wardley mapping, is that you just keep this ambiguity in there, but it gives you clarity on a larger scale. Okay. So then these all let's draw these lines, shall we? Doesn't always work as I want, but okay. The hot seat needs a location and time. The workshop, is that how it works?
Yes.
These are all interlinked. Okay.
I mean, up until now, I only saw it as just Meetup. I didn't consider that, we need to think about location and time all the time, but it's an essential part of it, yes.
Okay. Then, in terms of the location, but so you're speaking about the Meetup in general, right? Because right now you don't need a location because we're on Zoom.
Exactly.
So do you want to capture that, or are you? How do you want to do that?
I would still keep the location because the situation which we have currently is temporarily, so we will go back to do personal meetings, and they will again require us to have location and time set up, and the digital part of it will come as a part of it.
Okay. So what does the physical location, what does it need to be provided?
The physical location from experience so far was a cozy bar with little to no people in the evening, which provides us with enough space to organize our meetup.
Okay, that's more of a description of the location.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to capture that yet. Let's move on to time. What is the time? What's needed there to provide that?
Essentially, we just need to set up a regular time slot when we organize it, and we need to communicate it.
Okay. Setup of regular time slot. And the communication of that.
I'm thinking right now, maybe one aspect which I forgot to mention is that we actually require the Meetup platform itself in order to organize our Meetup.
Very good. Okay, so let's put that underneath Meetup, right?
Sure.
But why are you using the Meetup platform?
It is a way how to attract people to go to the Meetup.
See, okay, so sometimes when we come up with a component.
Yes.
But then we don't know how it's connected, and then we can ask the question, why do we need that? And then sometimes this helps us go back up. So in order, what does the Meetup need? The Meetup needs participants, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So it needs the structural things like hot seat and workshop, but it needs participants. And how are you getting participants? You're getting participants through the Meetup platform.
Yes, which is quite unfortunate.
Yeah, you don't like that.
I don't mind Meetup platform. It's awesome. It really connects people. It's great. What is missing is direct channel to communicate with Meetup members, which is the real problem there.
Okay. And why do you need to communicate with Meetup members?
To get a better connection from the people, getting their feedback, also getting their ideas and opinions, what to do better, what to make out of Meetup for the next one.
Okay.
Also something as when you join the Meetup, that's just it right now. There is no communication our sides to the Meetup members like that we would make them feel welcome.
So then I would add feedback here. In order to run a good Meetup, you need feedback.
Sure, absolutely.
And in order to get feedback, you need participants. But you also need the ability to contact those participants, right?
Yes. quite a lot of components right now.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to us such a simple
Yeah,
thing.
it's more of a decision that you make. You can group certain things together. We could group this all together as meetup.com. I recommend mapping multiple times. Okay, and this is contact. And so now this is provided by Meetup, right?
Right now, yes. We meet people in person when they come for the meetup, but it would be really awesome if we could communicate with them outside of the meetup as well.
Okay. And then what does Meetup, meetup.com, what does that need to? I think that ends there, no?
Yes, in order to do the meetup.com, you just need to register an account and start to be a paying customer in order to create a group.
Yeah, so I think this one. Okay, then setup of regular time slot. This is what the time component needs. And communication of that time slot. Let's try this one again. I don't know why it sometimes turns blue and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Then communication of the time slot. This is done through Meetup?
Yes, through meetup.com.
Okay.
Right?
Already we're seeing how reliant you are on Meetup, right? There's a lot of edges going towards Meetup.
Yes.
Setup of the regular time slot is you rely on what?
Is relatively independent. We just set it up, and we first, of course, got the feedback from the participants in the previous meetups, what fits them the best. And so far, Wednesday evening was, in the first week, was so far the best day to set it up. So that's why we do it. There is no more talk about it.
Okay. Then let's go over this. Do we have everything? What about the application? What did you need to provide that?
For the application itself, that would require additional 1 hour of doing Wardley mapping.
So you need more clarity.
Not only that, but the application involves a lot of activities. Like besides, again, the user feedback getting from the meetup would be great. You can connect it certainly with that, but development, for the development, you will require resources and the time and the funding. So I think the application itself would require its own tree of a Wardley map.
Okay, so let's leave that as one component for now.
Sure.
And see where we get. Okay. So what I would like to experiment with now, maybe there's a way for people to raise their hand in the chat or something like this, right?
I don't mind if they just directly step in and give questions.
Because I would like to know from the people that have attended the meetup in the past. I would like to ask them a question pertaining to where they think certain components are on the Genesis to Genesis custom built product on the evolution scale. So let's try this. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's take, for instance, the networking as an activity in the meetup. This is for the people that have been there already. Would you say this is a commodity utility? So this has been completely streamlined and is very predictable and reliable. That's on one end of the spectrum, or would you say it's more in the Genesis? It's I don't want to say unstable, but it's unpredictable and sometimes it doesn't work. But the principle is there, or is it somewhere in between? So just answer with Genesis, custom built, product, or commodity in the chat, please. Custom built, Genesis. Custom built, okay. So we put it here somewhere. Custom built. Okay. Same question for the workshop. Is the workshop Genesis, custom built, product, or commodity utility? Custom built again. Rahel says commodity. Any more answers? Okay. Then hot seat. Same question. Genesis. Product. Hey, Stefan, you're not supposed to be answering. Custom built. Custom built. Okay, I'm going to put that one slightly more to this side. Okay. So those are the ones that I could ask the audience in terms of now I'm going to adjust my questions back to Stefan. So Stefan, the meetup, where would you put the meetup on the evolutionary scale?
I'm certain I would actually leave it in the custom build.
Okay. What about feedback?
Feedback is in the Genesis.
Genesis.
Right now, the feedback
okay.
is only personal when people join the meetup.
Okay. Then contact with participants.
Genesis.
Genesis. Okay, we leave it there. The participants themselves. In some cases, it's tricky to answer where something belongs, but I would imagine that maybe for a meetup that's just getting started and doesn't know their target audience, that would be something that's Genesis. And a meetup that has like a very clear idea of who their audience is and they keep returning, that would be commodity. So where would you put the meetup participants?
I think somewhere around custom built, close to product, because we know we are aiming for starting entrepreneurs, startups, and we have the value proposition for them for sure.
Okay, let's move things around a bit. Let's try to make this one close enough. Okay, then we have the application.
Genesis.
Okay, let's bring this guy, oops. Okay, then we have the location.
End of custom build.
Okay, end of custom build. The time, I'm going to move it back when I move this one.
Yeah.
The time.
I would put it probably similar to location, somewhere end of custom build product. I mean, of course, we can experiment around, but I would say it's a relatively straightforward thing.
Okay. Then we have setup of regular time slot.
It's just like location and the time, somewhere on the right side.
More to the right than it is now.
Yes.
Okay, and communication of the time slot.
That's just a commodity right now.
Yeah, because we can go all the way here.
I mean, I wish we had a different solution than the Meetup platform itself. More personal, maybe, but yeah, right now it's a commodity.
Okay. So that's also something you could consider capturing, because when you say more personal, then that's you want to achieve something as the business. What's not on here, like a personal connection, right? So
Yes.
maybe that's something that you feel you need to run the meetup is a personal connection. Or maybe we can change this to personal connection with participants. And right now you're relying on meetup.com, but meetup.com is not doing a good job. Then to jump into sort of prescription already, because the map is pretty much done now, you could say you need a new component here. Let me just need a new component here, which is like, I don't know, meetup.com alternative, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of value being lost just because we cannot provide anything more to the Meetup members than just announce them that Meetup is happening through the platform itself. So if we had an alternative where we can say, hey, listen, we have these great materials for you to learn from, we have these great workshops which happened, and you have the recordings here. This all right now is missing, and that's pity, especially to new members. That would be a great value to be given right when you join the Meetup, saying thank you for joining. This is something that we already achieved. It's here for you to grab.
Makes sense. So then here already I'm seeing sort of how that would look, what you're saying, how that would look on this map. And this goes back to what I was saying about context. You see that everything goes through the Meetup right now.
Yes.
And to run the Meetup properly, you need feedback, and feedback relies on personal connection with the participants, and you're fully reliant on meetup.com, and meetup.com it's probably not going to move in this direction the way you want it, right? So there's resistance here. So in order to get this to move in this direction, you need whatever this relies on. So whatever personal connections with participants relies on, you need that to get further commoditized. And meetup.com is not going to do it for you. So you would need an alternative to that channel to start moving this in that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of ideas and thoughts in my head which I'm playing around with for a while. Because Meetup is great. Meetup.com as a platform is great at the basic, what it does, which is expose the events that you create. And that's great. But it's not good enough to communicate, to provide additional value, anything else. That's just, you cannot do that. Such a simple thing as write an email to your participants is very much not practical via the meetup.com.
Well, okay. Stefan, any other thoughts on the graph? And maybe we can open it up to questions.
I find it very fascinating. Seems very complex right now, but I like how structural chaos it is to me right now to see it. Oh man, so much so is on the left side, whereas I wish there was so much more on the right side.
Yeah, we can clean it up a bit, but
that's right. I would prefer other people to join and tell them their.
Yeah, me too. I'm interested in hearing about what people think. What was it more or less clear? Like, did this presentation and this demo pique your curiosity? That'll be my main question. I think we can unmute, no?
Yes, everyone can unmute themselves, so we can just go ahead and talk.
Thank you.
For me, it was interesting. Luis.
Interesting, yeah. I agree. It was very insightful and a new way to visualize. I like that.
Cool. That's good feedback.
Vicky.
Hi guys.
You're doing bagels, I bet.
Huh?
You're doing bagels, I bet.
I am doing bagels. That's why there's been no video and a lot of muting. But I wanted to say I thought the walkthrough with the real business was really, really valuable because sort of following along the rest of it was interesting. And of course, it doesn't have 120% of my full attention right now. But to see it applied in the real world is very interesting. So thank you, Jesse. I can see where this has a tremendous amount of potential for many businesses in any phase of their lifestyle, really.
Oh yeah, thanks. That's good feedback. It is quite. It's a complicated topic. There's a lot of stuff going on. So I tried to simplify it, but I think it does help to show an example, and to also it's also nice that we had an insight for Stefan here.
Marco?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I had a couple of internet issues during the presentation, but overall, I think that's a very interesting topic. It was pretty good to see each step, even with this very nice example of the meetup. Yeah, well done, Jesse. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Anyone else would like to express their idea? Or... All right. Well, Jesse, actually, I had an idea. Maybe we could have given already certain points on paper ahead of our meetup, just the structural points to speed up the things. That was the idea that right now came to my mind, that maybe some participants which were listening were not so engaged when they saw all the components being put in. Just as an idea that maybe we could have put in some components ahead of the time, but then I'm not sure how understandable would it be for all the participants.
Yeah, I don't think that would not be what I would try. I'm not sure what I would try, but I don't think I'd put things in ahead of time. I mean, it's a dense topic. It's very difficult to make this very light. And when I asked people what their familiarity was with the topic, I think I got all ones and 1, 2. So then it's like people that have never heard of this, they're here for the first time. Then that's a tough battle to fight. So I'm happy with what we got.
I must say I'm very happy with the overall knowledge that you presented, Jesse. That was really awesome. I was impressed by the story behind, starting with the Art of War, Sun Tzu, because this is like a absolutely must read for everybody who goes for the business. and that's I didn't think that has a connection to Wardley Mapping, but also that you presented it in the overall landscape of how you build the strategy or decision making, where the Wardley Mapping belongs. Well done on that part. I really like that. And also thank you very much that you helped with the meetup visualization on the Wardley Map. That I hope I can get the screenshot.
Yeah, for sure. I'll pass it through.
Awesome. And with that, if there's anything else you would like to share with our audience, Jesse, now is the time. Otherwise, I'll open the event for just networking.
Well, I've got a private message to explain Wardley Mapping broadly again in a very easy way. So I can try to do that before we shut up. Yeah. So to go over it again, I would say that if you want to know where you're going in business, so you want to be, let's say, have a successful business, and you imagine that's a destination. How do you usually get to a destination that you don't know exactly, how to get there? What you do is you use a map. You use Google Maps or some different type of map. And why do you use a map? Well, you use a map because a map tells you where you are, how you're moving, which direction you're moving, if you're getting closer or not. So there's a lot of information that's captured in the format of a map. And so all Wardley Mapping is it starts with a question: if we as a business have a destination we want to go, what would the map look like that tells us how to get there? And so that's a Wardley map. And to get a bit more concrete, because a map has 2 axes, so Google Maps will have, longitude and latitude. A Wardley map has evolutionary scale and the value chain axes. So one chain is how do things evolve, how far they evolved, and the other one is where is this in the chain of needs connected to my user need. And these are a bit abstract, a bit more difficult than longitude and latitude. But if you just accept that, then you can create a map and you can use that to guide your business towards your destination, because you're creating context. You're able to draw a path, which otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. So I hope that alternative explanation helps.
Very much so. Thank you, Jesse, very much.
Thank you, Stefan.
So, as a closing words, anyone who is still in the meetup, thank you very much for participation. I really appreciate that you joined us tonight. I must say a great thank you to you, Jesse, personally, that you accepted this challenge of presenting a workshop. I hope it was a great experience for you. I can confirm you have great knowledge of Wardley Mapping, and just, you can continually develop it and deliver it to your clients. You're doing a great job. Really well done.
Thanks for the opportunity, Stefan, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Definitely. Anyone else who is now in the chat, in the meetup, this is a free round. Go ahead. We can talk about everything now. And I'm stopping the recording right now.